Gary, let's take a moment and say thank you to our sponsors at Fuji Sport.
Yeah, absolutely.
They've been working with us for a very long time, not only on this podcast, but also at the Academy. And I'm taking a peek at their website right now, and they have a brand new ultra light gi. Now, this is mind-blowing. I'm looking at my size. A2 is 2.75 pounds. I mean, that's under 3 pounds. That's mind-blowing.
I could even lift that. And go to their website, fujisports.com. Check it out. Anything you could need for your jiu-jitsu journey, you can find at fujisports.com.
Hey, it's been a while since we started RŌL TV project.
It's been a while since you started it. I did come in later, and I can't say enough about it, especially the new platform. It's really amazing, fully customizable, and you know a little bit more about the structure.
Well, so 2 things you need to know. One is the subscription service, which is $9 a month. You can get access to hundreds of videos, hundreds of drills, techniques, and so on in a very nice library categorized as you need them. But 2 different lessons. You can actually purchase those individually and you own them. So the subscription is not tied to it at all. You can look at things like spider guard, half guard sweeps, half guard chokes, folding pass, and so on. There's so many of them out there. So take a look and see where you need help with the videos, right? 30%. If you type in RŌL Radio as a code.
Who doesn't like saving money? Go to rolacademy.tv. What's up, everyone, and welcome back. If you haven't already, please remember to hit the like, share, subscribe, download, listen, and whatever other button there is, and leave us a review wherever you do listen. That ensures that we can continue bringing you the great guests and amazing content that you have come to expect. On today's episode, we have a black belt under Brandon Bennet of the Renzo Gracie Academy, Robert Degle. Today, Robert discusses why he made the decision to forego a master's degree in philosophy to become a full-time grappler, instructor, and competitor. Robert also shares how he deals with the nerves of competing, the differences between training in the U.S. versus Europe, whether or not jiu-jitsu will ever become a huge spectator sport, and a ton more. Here's the RŌL Radio with one of the most sought-after instructors in the world, who has taught in over 18 countries and on 3 continents, Robert Degle.
Welcome to RŌL Radio.
And we are live.
Here we are. It's early, dude.
This is early morning for this for this show.
Yeah, I don't know if I've got any. I mean, I don't talk that much. I let you lead anyway. I might have even less to say today.
Well, listen, it's going to be a good conversation. But I am actually surprised that you are smiling and you are less grumpy than you were yesterday. So maybe there was something behind this. Maybe you should just first thing in the morning.
Well, maybe. So I haven't spent that much time with you yet. So
is that what it is?
Yeah, in a few hours, probably shortly after this is done recording, I'll be grumpy. I'll be in a bad mood again, and we'll know who to blame. So what?
Nothing.
Okay, then
do you have your coffee?
I do. Yes, I have my coffee and my BJJ Fanatics, or I'm sorry, the RŌL Academy.
Yeah,
Yeti that you got me with my name on it, and it's full and it's hot, and this will get me through.
All right. Well, sounds good. Shall we begin?
Yeah.
We're going international.
This is going
today.
nowhere right now. So
it's going over the pond. Rob, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Good. I'm doing well.
Good.
How are things going overseas?
Good. I'm training right now I have a tournament in about a week and a half in Serbia, and I'm training in London for it. And it's an ADCC Open tournament, and it looks awesome. I just found out today that it's going to be on Serbian TV, which is pretty cool. Yeah, so that's going to be a first for me. Never been on Serbian TV before. So.
Well, there you go. There's first for everything. Yep. But
yeah.
We just learned that you guys have something in common.
What? Oh, yeah. It's not jiu-jitsu.
It's not jiu-jitsu.
His is good. No, yeah. We're both Seinfeld fans. I found out. So, and you're like way younger. So I watched him first run. You're a lot younger than me, so you've caught him on Netflix or in reruns somewhere.
Well, it was when I was a little kid. My dad used to watch it all the time.
Oh, okay. God, I feel old, dude. Let's change the subject. Let's go back to jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Gary is 75.
Yeah, I feel like it. But that's something you shared with your dad, Seinfeld. I hope that day comes for me. My kids are little and they don't care right now. It's they don't have the attention span for something.
You got it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it was. Like he would put it on all the time, and I would watch it with him, and like I just got like so into it. I mean, I must have been watching Seinfeld since I've been like, so I'm 30 years old now. I think I've been watching it since I was like 6.
That's
maybe
amazing.
maybe even younger, honestly, because he would always just have it on the TV. So,
yeah. How's that influenced your sense of humor and just how you operate day to day? Because I can tell you what it's done for me. It's changed me a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's interesting. So I grew up in New York, and I think Seinfeld is like a quintessentially like New York show with like the humor. You know, like there's so many things in the show that like I find that are like very like quintessentially New York, right? And so I wonder, like, the environment that I grew up in and the show, like there's this like interaction between the two of them, right? So it's like the environment I grew up in shaped me and also shaped the show, and so I think that that's definitely a part of why I've always connected so much with the show and enjoyed it so much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This just explains why I don't get it.
Maybe
because I'm foreign and not from New York.
Yeah, I like it. I like it mostly because the characters over the years became just more and more horrible and awful people, and I kind of I enjoyed that so much and kind of rode that, and now it's probably made me an awful person as well.
I was about to say now you reflect.
No. Well, I'll tell you what I really like about it is I love to say the wrong thing, knowing it's the wrong thing to say, just to get a rise out of people. And I think that like Seinfeld's humor and Larry David's humor really push that forward, and I love it. But Thomas is looking at me like he's got no idea.
I know what you guys talk about. I mean, I've seen a few episodes, but I legit I don't get it. Let's be honest,
it's one of the best shows. That and The Simpsons. Seinfeld and The Simpsons have definitely shaped my sense of humor and how I look at the world.
Both classics for sure.
Absolutely.
Another thing that I just love about Seinfeld is I think it captures like the humor of the everyday like really, really well. Like the idiosyncrasies of just like everyday life. You know what I mean? And like New York is a place where you either find the humor in those idiosyncrasies or they make you miserable. So so I had back in the day when I trained at Renzo's in New York, I had a friend of mine who moved from Ohio to New York to train full-time jiu-jitsu. And he texted me one morning a video of this dude. Oh, sorry, not this dude. It was an old homeless lady taking a shit in the middle of the street outside his apartment building. And he was just like, what the fuck is going on? And I'm like, bro, I don't know what to tell you. Like, you're going to see stuff like that. And like, you either find... Obviously, that's disgusting, right? Like, but you either got to like find the humor in those sorts of things, right? Or it's going to drive you crazy, right? And Seinfeld's all about finding humor in those idiosyncratic, absurd things, right? And also, they're terrible people too. Like,
they revel in it.
Yeah, those two things I think go together. Like, to me, that's what makes the show so funny.
Yeah. All right, so here, I got a segue for Thomas, right? So in jiu-jitsu, I think you could say the same thing. If you don't find like the enjoyment in those moments, they'll make you miserable and you'll quit, right? I think especially for like the hobbyist. Do you think it's the same way? Like you got to embrace those little miserable moments in order to find something better in it, to get a gem out of it.
Yeah, 100%. And that's a tough thing to do. Like it's an ongoing process, right? So I was reading someone's Instagram post yesterday. Who it's a guy I've met him before, and he's like a very active competitor. And he was posting about how people told him in the past that if he kept competing, he would stop being nervous competing eventually. Well, that turned out in his case, he said it was not true, but continuing to compete, like he gets better, even though he doesn't get less nervous. And I think it's interesting because a lot of people said the same thing to me, right? Okay, if you keep competing, you're going to get less nervous. I don't really know that I found that to be the case. I still get nervous when I compete, but I think that you get better at dealing with the nerves, right? Not that you get less nervous, right? But that you get better at dealing with the nerves. And it's like, any other negative aspect of the sport, right? Like if you're in bottom mount and someone's sweat is dripping on your face, right? That doesn't get less miserable, but you get more used to it, right? So, yeah.
You learn how to ignore it.
Yeah.
And you just deal with it. Yeah, for sure. Thomas?
I'm waiting for you to continue
I don't-
conversation
no, you're
because
gonna-
you
if
guys
we-
took the show over. I'm just
If
gonna
we
sit
keep
back.
talking about Seinfeld and move it into The Simpsons, you're going to be miserable. So,
No, I actually enjoyed the conversation. That
Well,
was
here-
an interesting turn of
all
events.
right, I guess I'm running it today. Doing research for today, like you've taught 18 different countries all over the world. You're in London right now, right? I thought you were in Paris at this point.
I
but
was
now-
yesterday.
yesterday. See, I mean, that's amazing to me. I very rarely leave my 4 square miles. But so what is it? Obviously jiu-jitsu's taken you around the world, but why do you continue moving around all over the place, from your home base?
So, the reason for the last 3 months or 2 months rather, that I've been in London, I'm going to be here like another month more, is the training here is really good. So like I wanted to come to Europe for seminars, but I didn't want to be doing it I didn't want to be hopping around constantly. So I wanted to have one home base from which I could train during the weeks. And then on the weekends, not every weekend, but like a good number of the weekends, go to compete or teach seminars in other European countries. So that's why I've been here so long. Like at the end of my time in London, I will have been here as long as I was in Austin, Texas. So it's like,
Okay.
it's just another little, stop, along my training journey. You know what I mean? I've moved around so much because I am a competitor, but I'm also an instructor, right? I make my living as an instructor. Competition is that's something I do for myself, right? I'm not making a living doing that, right? So to make a living, I have to essentially, if I don't own a school, so I have to make instructionals and I have to travel to teach seminars. So I am traveling to teach seminars, you know what I mean? And then the other reason is just that I do also just enjoy it, right? Like I could probably only teach seminars in the US and do pretty well, but I like traveling. It's fun. I enjoy getting to go to places I've never been before, places that, otherwise I probably would have never gone to, right? Like I'm going to Serbia in a week and a half or 2 weeks to compete, right? I know almost nothing about Serbia. I know the basics. It's in the Balkans. It used to be part of Yugoslavia, right? But I don't know what. I have no idea really what to expect. So it'll be cool, right? And I've had that experience many times where I've gone to places and it's totally different than the US, or sometimes it's shockingly similar. There's some countries where you're shocked at how, like Singapore, for instance, is a country that I've spent time in. You could drop an American off there and you're not going to immediately notice that big a difference in many places there, right? Like they're English speaking and you're going to see like McDonald's and 7-Eleven everywhere, right? Versus, if you're in Paris is very immediately, obviously different than the US. It's just noticeably different. So it's also just cool to travel.
Out of all the countries that you visited, does one strike you? Creates a irreplaceable memory, something that was really good or something that was really bad, something that sinks in there. It's like, oh yeah, there was that place.
Well, I mean, if I were to pick my favorite country that I've ever been to, it's really hard because it's like a cop out. I like different places for different reasons, but if you put a gun to my head and you made me pick one, I'd probably pick Italy. So I'm in the process of getting so obviously I'm American, right? I have a US passport, but through my descent, I can get an Italian passport. So I'm in the process of working towards getting that. And going to Italy for the first time as someone with Italian heritage and who grew up around that in the US, it was really, really a special experience for me. And if you made me pick any one place, that would be my favorite country I've ever visited.
Would you move to Italy?
I definitely would. The one issue with it is that jiu-jitsu on an economic level is not developed to the point where it is in the US. So I would love to live there. I think it would be awesome, but it's tough it's not impossible, but I think it's difficult to make a living teaching jiu-jitsu in like a lot. This isn't just for Italy. This is for like a lot of European countries or just a lot of countries in general where jiu-jitsu hasn't it's not as popular yet. And then there's also the fact that, I'm of Italian descent, but I can't speak Italian. So to teach it I definitely want to learn Italian. That's a goal of mine. But as of right now, I don't know how to speak it. So let's say I open up a gym in Rome or something, half my students are not going to be able to speak English. And it's going to be more difficult to teach them. And I'm sure I would learn the language. When you're there, you're going to pick it up, right?
It's a similar situation to what Brazilian instructors are experiencing in U.S. They come in, they speak some English or broken English or whatever the case. They still in this learning curve, and they have this huge passion for this art, but yet the communication factor is so important in jiu-jitsu, especially when it comes to the details, right? It's all in detail. So knowing how to communicate clearly is critical to the success of you and your students. Hey, listen, so, in Europe, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you're probably more knowledgeable about this, but in Europe, what I noticed that there's a lot of small clubs, quote unquote. There's not many academies, successful business-oriented academies, but there's a lot of seminars that take place where people get together for a person such as yourself or some other instructors, and they kind of get together. What I'm getting at is I feel like seminars are more present in Europe than they are in U.S. versus in U.S. there's more quote-unquote academies, established businesses where you can go and visit and learn from specific people. Am I correct on this, or you've experienced something else?
Well, I definitely think that. So the first thing is for those people that don't know, Americans that have never trained jiu-jitsu in Europe or done sports in Europe, sports in Europe are very different than in the U.S. in the sense that you're absolutely right. You'll oftentimes find that the jiu-jitsu school is it's part of a sports club that's owned by the local government that just has mats that they're paying to train in by the hour, and isn't whereas in the U.S. you'll almost never find that. You'll almost always find it's a privately owned business by usually the head coach, right? The black belt who teaches at the academy. He owns the space, he owns the mat, right, etc. He built it out. Whereas in Europe, you'll find mats that are in a local sports club. Not always. You will find. So I just taught in Sweden, for instance, at a school that was privately owned. But in that case, it was also funded by the government. I don't understand how this works on a logistical level, right? But that's what they told me. And in Europe, it's much less common to see guys who make a living exclusively teaching. You'll usually have the black belt who runs the school, even if he owns the space, he might have another job. I just taught at this fucking huge, beautiful academy in Switzerland, which was it really, really big. You'd think that they're raking it in, but in reality, the head coach, the guy who owned the school, he said that he had a full-time job in addition to running this a very big academy, right? So there's a number of reasons for that. Ultimately, I think it comes down to sports culture, right? Which is beyond my expertise, right? It's just my observations teaching. But that's a definite difference that you'll notice. There are guys in Europe who all they do is teach, right? Tommy Langaker, right? Obviously, Espen Mathiasen, Santeri Lilius in Spain, right? So they exist, but there's definitely less. And you'll notice it's in the same countries, right? So Tommy Espen are in Norway. Santeri is Finnish, but he lives in Spain. And then I can think of a lot of Polish guys who that's true for. Mm-hmm. And then the UK is really more like the US. It's way more similar to the US, where it'll be privately owned businesses. I'm training at London Grapple, which is owned by a couple of the black belts who train at the school, right? They own it together. And as far as seminars go, I'm not sure. Maybe I'm not 100% sure. I've taught a ton of seminars in the US. I've taught a ton in Asia, but I've probably taught more in Europe than anywhere else. So maybe there is something to that.
Do you think part of that is contributed by the development of the sport and art in those regions? Meaning, in U.S., arguably one of the most developed, if not the most developed region or continent when it comes to jiu-jitsu, versus in Europe, for most part, is still developing, right? Short of UK, and some parts of Europe. I mean, it's still very much so in the very beginning of the development of the sport.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that I think it's probably I think a big part of it has to do with like wider sports culture in these countries. Like, again, I'm not an expert on like sports cultures worldwide, but just from my own observations, the U.S. is a very like capitalism, profit-oriented country, right? So it makes sense to me that the most of the jiu-jitsu schools would be like for-profit, privately owned businesses. Whereas, for instance, in Sweden, I asked the guys there, why does the government pay to subsidize this academy? And they said that it's done because the Swedish government wants everyone to have access to sports, which is like,
and I have some insights on that, and I don't know how much of it is true, but so the government essentially pays partial membership of the student in order for the student to make it more affordable. At the same time, there are some rules and regulations how much the academy can be charging and other things. So not only there's a cap on the suppressed by the business owner, but also makes it very available for the students, which makes it very accessible for everybody. At the same time, the opportunity to make money is by far more limited. And you know what I mean? It's like, it's more flatline versus in US, you really have these opportunities to skyrocket from a profitability perspective, and so on. So it's a very different environment, as far as I know, and there are by far more knowledgeable people who can tune in on this, but that's kind of for my conversation and my experiences. I talked to some guys from Sweden too, and that's kind of where I'm.
Okay, interesting.
Sweden and Poland, yeah. So, that's kind of where it's coming from. Listen, not a lot of people know, but you are actually like quite smart. Like you went to like school and stuff,
Not a lot of people know. It's a well kept secret.
What a segue.
So listen,
I thought I would break the ice here, and kind of. But no, on a serious note. Before the jiu-jitsu became successful and you really start making a living, you dipped quite into philosophy. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I was doing a master's degree and applying to PhD programs when I decided to drop out and do jiu-jitsu instead. So it's like, I mean, there's advantages to each, right? Like, I think you could argue that anyone that is pursuing graduate work in philosophy is probably pretty dumb, actually, to be doing that on one side, right? But then in another sense, right, there's obviously like, you're going to learn a lot of interesting things going down that road. For instance, like, how to make someone's coffee at Starbucks, no, I'm kidding.
They're important things, right?
Yeah. No, I've never worked at Starbucks. I'm just kidding. Instead, I would say, so when I was doing school, I worked at a vitamin store. I was the manager of a GNC. So an equally like waste of time job, but
it's not very lucrative. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to be really smart. You're going to be fun to talk to at parties, but you're probably not raking in a lot of money.
No, yeah. I mean, my goal was to become a professor, right? So like if you're doing like graduate work in philosophy, you're trying to become a professor. There's really nothing else you can do. So like, that's where I was shooting. But yeah, I mean, like,
well, take us back to the beginning briefly. So you go into school. How do you? What makes you make that selection? Why philosophy? What ticks you on that part to lead into master's and then PhD? I mean, that's a long route. That's a lot of investment from a personal side to really go down that way. What ticks you on this with this subject?
Yeah, so I first got into philosophy when I was like around like 12, 13 years old. My mom went to a Jesuit school, which meant that she had to take philosophy classes as part of, she wasn't a philosophy student, but she had to take a lot of philosophy classes as part of her curriculum. And so she had lying around the house, Albert Camus, Martin Heidegger, David Hume, like a bunch of different books from like different philosophers who I just like I wound up picking them up and reading them. And like it was a combination of like, when I was like around that age, I got like very depressed about like, I started to ask questions about like, what is the meaning of life and stuff. And I couldn't find answers to these questions. And I fell into like a pretty deep depression around that age. And a part of it had to do with, one of my closest relatives, my grandpa, was like, his health was starting to fail him. And so I started to get like, I was like thinking about like, okay, wow, like what is the meaning of life when you know, the people you love are going to like get sick and old and pass away. And is there any point to any of this? Are we just atoms? Does God exist? You know? And so I started reading these books and I had so many like philosophical questions, like, you know, things that are like very minute and strange. Like, how can I say what the meaning of a word is, right? Like, how can I identify that my perspective is the same as someone else is in terms of like how it is that we perceive the world, right? Like, and so I started to read these books. And then when I went to high school, I got kind of lucky in a sense that my high school offered a philosophy class, which is pretty rare in the United States. So I took a philosophy class in high school. And then that ultimately led to me wanting to study it like I went to college and I was like, okay, like I didn't really know what I wanted to do yet, but I knew I liked philosophy. So I just majored in that. And then I just kept going. And I knew that I liked research. Like for what makes me happiest in life, and this carries true to jiu-jitsu today, is that I like spending long periods of time sitting down, researching problems and trying to come up with solutions. And you know, like I watch a lot of tape now. I like watching instructionals now. And that's my research now. Whereas back then it was, I was actually doing it with jiu-jitsu back then too, because I started training around the same time that I went to college. But anyway, so I was doing jiu-jitsu like research, but also like I was reading a ton of books. Like I was, I was trying to resolve what I considered to be like very like vexing philosophical problems in my mind, you know, and the only way I felt like I could do that was by dedicating a lot of time to it. And the only way I could dedicate a lot of time to it was by making it like my job, which meant being a professor.
So you drop out of the PhD program for jiu-jitsu or?
Yeah, I never started a PhD.
Okay.
I didn't even finish a master's.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that segue takes place because of jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is the reasoning why you shift away from the plan of becoming a professor.
Yeah. So it was 100% because of jiu-jitsu. If it was not for jiu-jitsu, I would have kept going. Yeah.
What was the reason? What's your justification in your mind? Like, how does this take place? Like, walk me through your train of thought. You know, is this over a month of analyzing data and kind of studying yourself and making a life-changing decision? Or this is one day you wake up and say, screw this, I just want sweaty guys to be dripping sweat in my mouth, you know? And
well, I guess it was kind of like it was a little bit of both. So like, I would say like, so basically what happened was I was studying philosophy, right? And then at the same time, I was training at Renzo's as part of the DDS, right? And then I didn't really I was competing like a lot, you know, and I was pretty serious about it. Like I was training 4 hours a day, like I would say minimum. In addition to, I was working full time, taking grad school classes and training 4 hours a day. I mean, it was really, really exhausting. And I started to teach jiu-jitsu like sporadically. Like I did a few seminars here and there, just for like side money. Right. And then I got an opportunity to travel with a friend of mine to Singapore to coach him and then teach some seminars there. And when I was in Singapore, this is the first time I ever went to Singapore. I've been there a couple times, but this was the first time. I had this realization that like I could actually make a living doing this, right? Like this Singapore trip was just very sporadic. My friend was competing there. He asked me if I wanted to come help coach him. And then I announced I was going, and people hit me up for seminars. And it was like, wow, this is something I had never visualized ever doing. Like, this was not a planned thing. Like, this was just like, wow, I'm going to this really cool, interesting country that like I've heard about, but I never really thought I'd ever go to. And I'm getting to teach jiu-jitsu and make money and meet like cool and interesting people and travel to this really like interesting place. And I thought about like what it is that I actually enjoyed about philosophy. What I enjoyed was the research. And the life of an academic philosopher is it involves a lot of like politics. It involves a lot of like I was told by many professors that I was likely going to have to write about topics that weren't really what I was interested in order to get like a job, right? Like I was like, okay, so like I'm going to give up like 10 years of my life to get a PhD, which is that's a reasonable length of time to expect you're going to have to do to get a PhD in philosophy in the US. So I'm going to have to give 10 years of my life to get a PhD, to maybe eventually get a tenured position in like some place I don't really want to live. You have to take whatever job you could get. You can't be picky. Like I could get a job in, no offense to Kentucky, but like I don't really want to live there. But if I got a job in Kentucky, I would have to fucking take it. You get no choice really about anything like that. So, and then I'm not writing about what I want to write about. So it's like, like, whereas in jiu-jitsu, I could do all this stuff that I wanted to do in philosophy I could spend my days researching topics that interested me. I could, devote my efforts towards things that I actually found interesting. And I thought I wouldn't have to involve myself with politics at all. There's jiu-jitsu politics, but
that was a reality check for you.
Yeah. I mean, but at the time I was like, and I still do think it's true that I think if you look at academic philosophy versus your potential life as a jiu-jitsu coach, I do think that there are less politics in jiu-jitsu because like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you would measure that, but it's just like, I think you can avoid the politics a little bit in jiu-jitsu as long as you just try to stay away from it. Yeah. Whereas in philosophy, there's no way you have to be involved with it. You have to, there's no way around it.
I see what you're saying. So if you had to pinpoint one reason, would it be the fact of the flexibility of traveling? Was it the compensation? Was it the jiu-jitsu itself that made you choose jiu-jitsu versus philosophy? Like when you go on that trip to Singapore, what is the epiphany? What is that is like, damn, this completely happened by accident. And damn, I could do this for a living. Like why I didn't notice this before? Like what was the one thing that really stuck with you?
So there was actually kind of like one moment where I had this like epiphany where I was walking. So it was early one morning and I was walking outside of the hotel we were staying at, and I was right by the National Library in Singapore, like the main branch. And I walked inside, and I love libraries because I like research, and libraries are really nice, quiet environments where you can sit down, you can study for like hours at a time, and you can learn new things, right? And I went into the library, and then I came out of the library, and I remember like looking up on it, at it. And I actually put this in my stories, so it's cool. I can go back and like revisit this moment. And I was like, fuck, like this is such a better life, because it's really about like the freedom to be able to, like, what I want to do is spend time researching topics that are interesting to me, right? That's what I want to spend most of my time doing. I don't want to have to spend time on like, if I went down the philosophy route, I don't want to have to spend time researching topics that are not immediately interesting to me. And I don't want to have to spend time being involved with like university politics. Like, I don't fucking care about either of those things. But here I was able to travel to a really interesting place and spend time researching stuff that I actually was interested in because of jiu-jitsu. And like, that was kind of like the epiphany moment, like being outside the National Library in Singapore. And yeah, so if that makes sense.
Do you think that train of thought of the philosophy route, the being anchored into some of those rules and regulations, choosing, having to write about topics that you don't necessarily agree with or you don't like them, and kind of having this being a location, being somewhere places where you don't necessarily want to be. Is that similar to owning your own academy? And where I'm going with this is, it appears to me is that everything you talk about relates to everything you talk about as far as jiu-jitsu, traveling, doing seminars. It relates to this sense of freedom. I can do this, and I know this is I can be very successful with this. I can travel. Nobody's tying me down. I can do what I want essentially while I'm doing this research, which research on itself, it is a sense of freedom. You can, maneuver this any way you like. Now, this philosophy route is kind of tied in. Owning academy is kind of tied in. So I'm wondering if you enjoy this life of freedom, quote unquote, of traveling, doing seminars, sharing, doing research. Would you be happy owning an academy? Is that even in the back of your mind somewhere when you were, older, like Gary 75? You got to do something. You know what I mean? Like, nobody wants to talk to you about Seinfeld anymore.
Or
like, what are you gonna do?
Can't get through the airport because they're out of wheelchairs.
You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah. I do, but I don't think they're very similar. And I actually do want to own an academy. I don't think they're very similar because the big difference is that, okay, if you're owning an academy and you do it right, hopefully you actually like jiu-jitsu. So therefore you get to spend your time researching what it is you actually like, right?
Hopefully you do.
Yeah. And there's a lot of different areas in jiu-jitsu. So like you can pick something, like you get to choose ultimately what you want to spend your time researching, right? Like if you like the gi, you can spend your time researching the, high level gi competition. Yeah. If you like sub only, you can go down that route. If you like ADCC, blah, 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 whatever, right? And simultaneously, you also ultimately get to pick where to do it, right? So like, when I get my Italian passport, I'm going to have the opportunity to either open up anywhere within the European Union or within the United States. So, and I'm leaning pretty heavily towards the United States just for practical reasons. But I'm not closed off to Europe. It's a possibility. And, because you get to pick where you do it, right? Like no one's putting a gun to your head and making you go somewhere to open an academy. So I don't really view them as being too similar. I do really want to have an academy. Like that's a goal of mine, right? Like right now I'm really, really focused on the next set of ADCC trials. So I want to get my Italian passport in time and I want to do the European ADCC trials. Like we're talking like a year and a half from now, right? So that's everything I'm doing is building towards that. But in the meantime, right, like I have to think about making money, so I've got to do seminars. And I'm also I want to do the big IBJJF tournaments coming up, like Nogi Pans, Nogi Euros, Nogi Worlds. So like those are the short-term goals. But the long-term is trials a year and a half from now. And then after that, like if I, in a year and a half from now, I go and I don't win trials, I'll probably open an academy. If I win, then the choice comes, okay, I've got another year until ADCC. So I'll probably spend another year just focused on training. And then, and eventually I'm going to open an academy, whether it's a year and a half from now, 2.5 years, because there are major benefits to having your own academy. So yeah, it might even be before then. I don't know, but yeah.
It seems like you are extremely goal driven.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I like to be like very organized with what I'm doing as much as is possible. Like this is one of the things that I don't like about like the super fight community is that sometimes I feel like I can't plan because it's like, they'll hit you up like, hey, in a month, do you want to do a super fight? It's like, well, I've already planned like a seminar that day. You know what I mean? This is why one of the reasons I like tournaments better, ultimately, because I can look at the calendar. I can look at, Nogi Worlds are in December. That's several months from now. And I can plan out that far, right? It's reasonable to expect, I don't know the exact date, but the next European trials are going to be anywhere from September to October 2023, right? That's pretty reasonable to expect.
A little bit more predictability with
that, right? For sure. Yeah.
Do you think that jiu-jitsu competition, whether sub only or tournament style, will ever get to the point where you guys don't have to do seminars or own an academy? You can actually make a living off of athletic performance?
I don't think so. I don't think so. And I think that the attempt to shoehorn that into jiu-jitsu kind of like spoils what I find interesting about it, actually.
So you don't think that jiu-jitsu will ever become what UFC is? I mean,
No chance,
so mainstream in the, trillions of dollars of revenue and so on.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think it can become mainstream, but I don't think it'll ever be a profitable spectator sport. So like, look at grappling sports worldwide, right? Judo, wrestling, sambo, sports sambo, not combat sambo. Like, these are very popular, but they're not profitable spectator sports. None of them are, right?
I don't know. I don't know, Robert. Come on, judo is what, number 2 sport in the world? You don't think it's profitable?
It's not packing stadiums. Right?
Even if it is, it's the reason why those guys are able to do what they're doing is because it's an Olympic sport and it's subsidized by the government. If you made it purely for profit, I don't know if it would be. I don't know if it would be sustainable. Ultimately, when we're talking about profitable spectator sports for spectator combat sports, the ones that have a proven track record are all striking sports or involve striking, right? So MMA, boxing, Muay Thai, to a lesser extent, kickboxing, right? I'd say MMA, boxing, those are the 2 most proven profitable combat sports, right? People like to see other people getting punched in the face, right? Like,
entertainment purposes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the knockout will always score more viewers than a submission. It just always will.
I think we just need to break more arms. That's it. There's my solution.
That turns
more violence.
Yeah, more violence. That turns people off, though, I think. Right? I mean, I think a quick knockout, not quick in the sense of early in the round, but a quick, hard knockout is seemingly less violent than dislocating an elbow.
Which is such a nonsense.
Right, it is. It is nonsense. It is. But I think, to the viewer, I mean, I think it's much more violent when something gets broken.
So you think in that train of thought, you think that instructors will need to continue doing seminars, private lessons, owning academy to really enjoy the life of the competitor?
Yeah, I think that the way we should think about it is you are a professional instructor first and foremost, and your competitive goals are something that we're ultimately doing more for ourselves than for anyone else. And there's nothing wrong with like people who want to try to turn it into a spectator sport. I don't have a problem with it. In fact, I like seeing it, right? Like no one on earth would be happier to be wrong about what I just said than me. Like, I would love if it became a spectator sport where we can make money competing. The one thing I don't want is it to be done at the expense of the integrity of the sport. And when I say that, I don't mean like, oh, people shouldn't talk shit. I don't personally want to talk shit, but I don't really give a fuck if other people do. That's their own business, right? Like, ultimately, guys involved in competitive sports are going to talk shit to each other, especially when it's like a combat sport. What I mean when I say the integrity of the sport is I mean more so like doing dumb things with the rules, which make it like silly, like.
So what you're saying is to water down the rules in order to make it entertaining, to attract more people to watch.
Yeah, I don't want to like point out specific rule sets, but like I've seen some rule sets which are just like
you can. Nobody's listening. Nobody's listening to this anyway. Who cares?
Well, we just had Daniel Maya on, and he like broke down all the rule sets, talking about how you can game them and be really boring and be and almost cheat the system. But I think we're talking about it a little differently, is to set the system up so that people are entertained more.
Yeah. So I like rule sets which encourage people to do what obviously there's bias involved here. There's always going to be bias. What I would consider to be good jiu-jitsu. And I would consider good jiu-jitsu to be a combination of positional skills and submission-based skills. So if there's a rule set and I see someone get mounted and then their back taken, and then in overtime they armbar the other guy, I'm like, what the fuck did I just watch? You know what I mean? Like, I hate that shit. Like, obviously that's EBI. That would be EBI rules, for instance, right? Like, I want it. I want to see good grappling rewarded, and I consider good grappling to be positional grappling and submission grappling, right? Both. I want to see both major areas of the skills of grappling rewarded for being done well. And I don't like seeing rule sets where that's not the case. So like, and then there's also just rule sets that are just like mega wacky, where it's like, it's, you know, you've got tag team, you know, stuff. Which, you know, I have no problem with that as like a fun sideshow, right? In fact, I'll watch it. It can be entertaining, right? I just don't want to see that become like the main thing, right? Like we have to like, if you look at the early history of professional wrestling, for instance, it was at one point a series of legitimate wrestling matches. It was catch wrestling, right? But what promoters realized was, two equally matched, highly skilled opponents is not as fun as a scripted shit show, right? So for the average paying, you know, audience member, right? So I don't want to see jiu-jitsu turn into, I just don't want it to turn into that, right? Yeah. I want it to keep its integrity in the sense that it remains a sport where the skill of the athletes is the most important thing overall, and it gets rewarded. You get rewarded for your skill. You know what I mean?
Well, let me ask you this then. In striking, the ultimate goal is to knock somebody out. In judo, the ultimate goal is to throw somebody and them landing on their back. Mm-hmm. In wrestling, perhaps more complexity. However, the goal is very simple. It's to pin somebody to the ground. I feel like in jiu-jitsu, because it's so broad what we can do, and there is so much diversity as far as positions, submissions, transitions, so on, it's very difficult to pinpoint what the true goal is. Mm-hmm. Right? Submission on its own is not, in my mind, it's not necessarily the goal, because you can be top, bottom, sideways, upside down, moving, constantly. Like, do you think that there is an ideal rule set for jiu-jitsu? Are we always going to have to take these sacrifices of you know, watering down somewhere to make it entertaining? Because ultimately, listen, if nobody's watching jiu-jitsu, you can't do anything for a living. I can't do anything for a living. This show doesn't exist. My academy needs to close down. Like, there has to be a certain level of attraction to what we do.
Yeah. Well, all grappling rule sets have bias towards the execution of certain skills, right? So, for instance, like folk style wrestling, it looks very different than Greco or freestyle. And,
true,
you know, yeah. And what skills will be encouraged by that given rule set is going to like motivate what skills the athletes develop, right? So we have to ultimately make a certain decision about like, what do we care about seeing, right? And in jiu-jitsu, I don't think there's any rule set. My opinion is the IBJJF rule set is the best. If they got rid of advantages, and what I would like, this will never happen, but what I would like is get rid of advantages and add points for near submissions. So this is actually what Naga does. Naga is kind of like a small, you know, they've been around a long time, but nobody looks at them as a serious tournament. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like or Kasai did this actually. Yeah, I think Kasai, the matches were too short. That's my problem with it. But like,
whatever happened, I like that show. I like that show. Yeah.
They were awesome. I think they're done. That's what I've heard. But
yeah, that's what I heard that too. Anyhow, sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah, no worries. So like, okay, so, and like the reason why I like that, let's say you had IBJJF, but with Naga or Kasai's rules regarding near submissions, which is you could get 1 or 2 points for a near submission. I don't remember how Kasai did it, but in Naga, it's like, it's ref's discretion how close it is. So it can be 1 or 2. And so like, I really like that because what it does is it encourages, guard passing skills to get developed, guard retention skills to get developed, pinning skills to get developed, back taking skills, pin escapes. And it also encourages submissions. I don't think you need the submission points because we already have like the encouragement to pursue submission is already there in the sense that if you get the submission, the match is over and you win, right? So like that's always going to be there, right? But I think it's important to have points for earning position because I want there to be something that encourages athletes to move towards those positions. And we could have debate about what positions should earn points, right? But I think that the way the IBJJF does it is pretty good, where, okay, side control, you pass the guard, knee on belly, mount, back control. These are all, and obviously positional changes, right? Like a sweep or a takedown that scores you points as well. So like, yeah, I think it's pretty good that way. And we can debate endlessly what, like, let's say you take the back and in IBJJF, you throw on a body triangle. There's no points there. Obviously, most people agree that's idiotic, right? That's pretty stupid. But that's just how it is under that rule set, right? I think it should get changed, but as it stands, if you're a competitor and you're going into that rule set, you have to know that, right? You have to know, I need the hooks. You could even argue like a high ball ride. I don't know if you guys know what a high ball ride is, where you only have around one leg, right? That is just as controlling, in my opinion, as if not more than having both hooks in, right? But there's no points for that, right? And you could argue it's more controlling, but we have to ultimately have semi-arbitrary lines. It's a sport. You have to have these semi-arbitrary lines where you say, this is where the points are scored. This is a goal, right?
Let's be honest, no matter what rules we have, even in ideal, quote unquote, situation, ideal rules, there will be always somebody who doesn't like them. There will be always somebody who will say, well, this rule is stupid. I don't like this. This is not my preference. But what you said is very important, is when you engage into these situations of competing in these specific rule sets, one, you need to know the rule sets. And two, in my opinion, you need to shut up. You need to be quiet. Those are the rules, and you need to play by them. If you don't like it, you don't play them. So I think those are the kind of important anchors, and hopefully we'll continue developing this, because Jiu-Jitsu has evolved in the last 5-10 years tremendously. I mean, what I remember Jiu-Jitsu 20 plus years ago is not what it is today. It's actually mind-blowing, especially like watching Worlds this weekend, and you have some of these pioneers retiring, Zanji and Lavazza Jr. and all, Mendes brothers, and getting inducted to Hall of Fame and all that. I mean, like, I watched these guys way back, decade ago, and today they are the right on the top. They are the guys we all look up to, and they have kind of painted the path for all of us. So, what a phenomenal continuously developing sport it is. Let's pivot this a little bit back. Are you smiling? Why are you smiling? This is serious topics we are talking about. This is not Seinfeld, okay? This is serious jiu-jitsu business here.
Again, when we started, you were talking about how I was happy. I told you that by the end of this, I wouldn't be, and I think this is the turning point right here.
Oh, no.
This is it. Rob, I'll be fine with you.
Cranky. Okay, great.
It's not a problem. You and I won't. I mean, not that, God forbid, but yes, it started. It started.
Hey, do you remember your very first day on the mat?
I do. Well, it depends on so I started wrestling first. So if you count that, then no, I don't remember my very first day. But jiu-jitsu, I do. I remember my first jiu-jitsu session ever, and I had watched a ton of like jiu-jitsu on YouTube, and I was like very excited to get started. And when I showed up my first class, I had wrestled, so I had wrestling experience. And I knew a few things because I had BJ Penn's. I had 2 books. I had Eddie Bravo's three books. I had Eddie Bravo's Mastering the Rubber Guard. Yep. I had Marcelo Garcia's X Guard book, and I had BJ Penn's. He called it the Book of Knowledge, kind of a silly name for a jiu-jitsu book, but that's what it was called. And I had these 3 books, so I had like a basic understanding of like guard position and mount and stuff like that. And my first session, I just kind of like, I didn't really know what I was doing, obviously, but like, because I had those books, I think I knew a little bit more than your average white belt. So like, I remember somebody put me in an omoplata, and I was like, oh, okay, I saw this in the BJ Penn book. This is an omoplata, right? Like, and then somebody put me in a triangle, and I had the same thought. I was like, oh, okay, this is a triangle. I'm about to get tapped out. And
this is what it feels like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
How long did you wrestle before you started jiu-jitsu?
So I wrestled. I did 1 practice when I was like 8. So I guess I do remember my first day of grappling ever, because I did 1 practice. I hated it. and I quit. And then I came back when I was 14, and from 14, or maybe I might have been 13. So like 13 or 14 to 18, I wrestled. And I did that because my mom wanted me to play a sport. I was not like a sporty, athletic kid growing up. She wanted me to play a sport, and my friends were on the wrestling team. So I was like, all right, I'll just fucking do that, I guess.
Just stop bothering me. Be quiet. I'll just do it finally.
Yeah.
So was that? Go ahead. Sorry.
No, well, I was just going to say we talked to a lot of people who've come from wrestling, and those first days.
I was about to bring that up. Our last episode.
Alex Humen was like, he wrestled for years through college, hits the mats and gets, in his words, demolished, just destroyed. And then he was like, "Oh, I need to know this." Instead of like, "Okay, I'm no good at this," and stepping away from it, he was like, "Wow, what just happened? I need to know this." Was it a similar experience? Like, I mean, you had a little bit of knowledge, but when you actually hit the mats, was it like, "Oh my God, this is amazing, and I really need to dive into it"?
I think I'd actually already had that moment kind of just by watching it. Like when I started training, I already knew I was going to keep training, right? Like I didn't foresee not doing it because I had watched so much of it. Like when I was wrestling, at about 16 years old, I did a few classes. I mean, I don't even really count this as me starting, but I did like a few classes at Sarah's gym over the summer. I don't even count that as me really starting, but and I knew I wanted to keep doing it, but I didn't have the money I couldn't afford it at the time. So I just went back to wrestling, and I was like, man, I know I want to do this. I watched like a lot of guys on YouTube, like Shinya Aoki and BJ Penn, and so I kind of knew I was going to stick with it. So it wasn't like when I showed up, like I definitely got my ass kicked because I didn't know what I was doing, but it wasn't like I was expecting to get my ass kicked. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't shocked by it. I was just like, all right, well, I want to like learn how to do this stuff. And I jumped in like, as soon as I started training like a ton. Like I was training like twice a day, because I was like, I want to pick up really fast because I had like, in wrestling, I tried really, really hard, but I was just like always mediocre. Like I wasn't very good. Like I was okay. I wasn't like terrible. I was a decent average level varsity wrestler, but I really wanted to be like great, but I just never was. And when I started jiu-jitsu, I was like, okay, this is my opportunity. I can try again. I could be great at this instead, and I never, when I say great, I wasn't thinking, oh, I'll be like a world champion. I was just like, I just want to be like a good black belt. You know what I mean? So that was the goal. I wanted to get good. And I in between my school and my work schedule, any time that I had free, I pretty much was training.
What was different between those two mindsets, between the wrestling, early on the wrestling, and when you were doing jiu-jitsu? You said, I wanted to try it again. I want to do this different. I want to actually be good at this. What was different as far as your approach?
Well, the biggest thing is that wrestling in the US is almost entirely connected to school. So when you have like a very limited time frame, and you can also only practice when you're in season, or if you're doing like camps in the summer. And I usually didn't have the money to do these big camps. So like I just didn't have enough time to train. You know what I mean? Like, so I remember one summer I did like there was a 2-week camp, and I paid for the first week, and I didn't have the money for the second week. And the coach who was running the camp saw how much I wanted to keep training, and he was really nice. He let me do the second week for free. But that's a rare thing. And that's 2 weeks we're talking about. You know what I mean? How much progress are you going to make in 2 weeks? Whereas in jiu-jitsu, I could show up every day. You know what I mean? By that point, I had a steady job. I started working. I got a job at a pizzeria when I was 17, so that I was able to afford to actually train. Jiu-jitsu is not fucking cheap in the US, so it's more expensive than wrestling. But the difference is, when I was younger, I didn't have a job. So when I was older, I had the job that I could pay for jiu-jitsu. So I could show up to jiu-jitsu every day, and it was that ability to train more consistently without like a timeline. In wrestling, you've got 4 years. I started late middle school, early high school, was what I did 1 year in middle school and then I had 4 years in high school. So I had 5 years, like how good can you get in 5 years? You can get a lot better, but especially it's not even really 5 years. It's the season, so you're talking 5 seasons. And then I would lift weights in the off season. I would run a lot. I would swim a lot. I would do camps when I could afford to do them. And I would like beg training partners to train. I'd be like, come on, let's get together. Let's train. But like, how often do fucking high school kids want to do that? Not that often. So the training opportunities were limited. I think with jiu-jitsu, you have far greater training opportunities. So and with wrestling, because the training opportunities are more limited, it really rewards the kids that are going to be more naturally athletic, so like that, not always, or the kids that are maybe from a family of wrestlers. So they have year-round access to training or whatever. I didn't have either of those things. So with jiu-jitsu, I had the ability to train every day. I could study matches. Like I studied a lot. Like I would always be on YouTube. Back in the day, Budo videos was kind of the flow of its time, right? I'd be on Budo videos all the time. I still have a Budo videos account. So I think that was a lot of people were probably expecting me to say something like, well, wrestling is not about technique and jiu-jitsu is. I think that's complete, total bullshit. They're both highly technical. I think wrestling is definitely, you have a higher athletic requirement than in jiu-jitsu. That's definitely the case. But I do think that you can be a very successful wrestler. Like, I'm not an unathletic guy. I'm just like average level, right? And I think an average level athletic guy could succeed in wrestling. I just would need more training consistency than was available to me when I was in school. Whereas with jiu-jitsu, because it's a for-profit thing, because you can train every day pretty much if you want to, it's a lot easier. You have way more opportunities to learn and develop and get better. Yeah.
So you talk quite a bit about training opportunities, consistency of training, studying videos, really continuous improvement. You talk about training twice a day, 4 hours a day. Is that the expectation that one should set for themselves as an average grappler? I don't know, I'm a mechanic, doctor, whatever, a lawyer, whatever the case might be. I don't do jiu-jitsu for a living. Is that the goal that they should be setting for themselves, to train to that level, to that frequency?
It just depends on what your goals are. I mean, for the average person, that's not reasonable. But I mean, I do keep in mind though that when I was in grad school, I was training like 4 hours a day, working 39 hours a week. You'll notice not 40, so they didn't have to give me benefits. They were fucking rat bastards. But anyway, working 39 hours a week and I had a full-time class schedule. You know what I mean?
Walk me through your day. Your day.
It changed a lot depending on the day. So I worked, so for instance, to make up the 39 hours, I would work every Sunday from like 8 to 5. And Saturdays I usually had off. I requested Saturdays off so I could go to competitions. And I only worked, if I remember correctly, I think it was 4 days out of the week. And that would be like, I forget how many, but one day would be like a 12-hour day. I think I had like 2 12-hour days, which comes up to 24, and then 2 7-hour days or something like that. And then but the thing is, I will say it was a super easy job. I mean, I was the manager of a GNC. You know what I mean? Like I spent most of my days like watching jiu-jitsu videos on my phone, like sitting around, like not really doing that much. I stocked the shelves. If somebody came in, I would say, hi, you want to buy some protein, right? Like it wasn't like I wasn't working like manual labor or something, right? Anyway, so I would be doing that. And I would also do a lot of homework when I was at work. But yeah, so a semi-average day would look like, okay, I'd get up, I would drive my car to Queens. I would park my car at Queens College, which is where I went to school. Then I would take the bus to the subway. I would take the subway to 30th Street in Manhattan. I would walk then to 34th Street. So I got off at the 34th Street Herald Square station. Then I would walk to 30th Street, which is where Renzo's is. I would train from this is all happening at like 5 a.m. in the morning. And then I would train from like 7:30 to like, let's say about 12:30. And then I would go after that. I would take the train and then the bus back. I would either take classes, like college classes, right, at the end of the day, or I would go to work. So that was most days, right? So we'd be training in the morning and then either work or school. And with the classes, I would pack them in such a way that I would make sure I would never work and go to classes on the same day. You know what I mean? So like, because there's just no way logistically I could get there, you know? It's just like, because I had pretty long commutes as well. So yeah, so I would take like 2 classes and then my day would end at like 10 p.m. Or if I was working, it could end at like 11 p.m. Right? So, and then actually now probably just 10 p.m. But then I would.
The reason why I'm asking this is because often we find ourselves in the positions where, you know, we are tired, long day, you know, and it's at times Jiu-Jitsu is the one that falls as a sacrifice of a long day, if you will, you know, you know, and again, your situation might have been different because you're looking at this as a professional, you know, but for many out there, it's a strong hobby, it's a getaway form, it's a, you know, opportunity to work out and learn jiu-jitsu and so on and do what we love. But yet so often it does fall short, you know, after a long day, after when we are exhausted, long week, whatever, 39 hours of work and all that, right? But I'm trying to pick your mind here. What drives you to put this enormous amount of time between school, work, and jiu-jitsu? Because all that adds up to, you know, as I'm counting, probably somewhere around 70, 80-hour weeks, right? I mean, you tell me, but it has to be somewhere there. That your work is almost 40 plus everything else that you do, right?
Yeah, it was like not easy. I mean, I look at that time of my life and I sometimes like actually kind of miss it because I like being busy. I'm a person who like, I don't like having too much downtime because like, I just get really bored fast. I think it's like a high in neuroticism, maybe like I want to go. Oh, can you?
No. I'm saying this guy right here. This guy right here. The same thing.
I thought you were saying something was wrong with the audio. No. Okay.
This guy right here. I can't sit still. He can tell you.
Yeah, it's always go.
Yeah. But exactly, yeah. But keep in mind, at this time in my life, I wasn't doing this because I was thinking to myself, "Oh, I'm going to be a full-time jiu-jitsu guy." I was doing this because that's when Danaher's classes were, and I wanted to learn from him. Like, there was even one moment where Danaher asked me if I wanted to be a full-time. He's like, "Do you want to make your living in the martial arts?" And I said, "No, I just want to be a philosophy professor, but I really love jiu-jitsu, and I wanted to train seriously." You know, I was at an academy filled with guys who were full-time guys, but I was myself not a full-time guy, and I wasn't intending on becoming one. I really loved jiu-jitsu. Like, I think what motivated me was that, like, I'm the kind of person that if I do something and I really like it, I wind up getting obsessed with it. So that's kind of, I was super obsessed with it, but I didn't really think of it as something. I don't know. I was very focused on like becoming a philosophy professor because I saw that as more like a legitimate way to make a living. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, this is like, it's a real job with a salary, you know? Yeah. And jiu-jitsu is definitely not that. And so like, but I was training because I loved it, you know? And that was really it.
Do you think that stigma around jiu-jitsu still exists? Meaning it's really not a real job. You can't make money. You know, being a philosopher or being a GNC manager is a little bit more tangible, if you will, right? Do you think that still continues?
I mean, like, that was just in my own head, you know what I mean? I don't think that, I mean, I'm making a living teaching jiu-jitsu, and I think that it's entirely possible. You can make a living teaching jiu-jitsu. You can make a living running tournaments. You can make a living selling jiu-jitsu clothes. You can make a living, you know, doing all sorts of things in jiu-jitsu. So obviously it's not true. It was just like, obviously like what was in my head, right? I thought to myself, okay, this is a tangible career route. Jiu-jitsu is, it just didn't occur to me that it like could be, you know what I mean? So
the reason why I'm asking is because I just had this conversation with somebody and you know, their comment was like, yeah, you can't really make money on jiu-jitsu. And I kind of looked around the room we were standing in and I was like, I hope we do because this is what I do.
Yeah.
You know. So, but I'm wondering if that stigma exists for the general population, as you know, jiu-jitsu is more of a hobby. You know, there's no money in it, which that might have been a case maybe a decade ago. But I don't know. Today there are some very, very successful.
Yeah, it's all about perception, right? I mean, people don't know it, so they have a preconceived notion of what it is. I remember I have a buddy who's like the nicest guy in the world. I've never seen him mad at anybody, except for one time when I said, "Are you?" When I was, we were both a lot younger, but I was like, he was a bartender, and I was like, "Are you going to get a real job?" And in my perception of a real job at the time was you clocked in, you clocked out, you got a paycheck from a corporation. And that was a real job. And he was like, what are you talking? Look how effing hard I work. Look at what I'm doing. And now, he owns 3 super successful bars in the city. He had a real job. My perception wasn't keyed in on that, And I think it's the same way in jiu-jitsu as people think, oh, you just go and hang out with your buddies, roll around a little bit, and then you're done. And it's not real. It's not legit.
Yeah. I think it's important to understand that. So like, you're not making a living training, you know what I mean? Like, I think some young kids, they go, wow, you can make a living in jiu-jitsu. That's just like what I do at the academy, right? Like, no, no one is paying you to just train with your friends, right? You're getting paid to, so for instance, I'll give you guys an example, right? Let's say you're a famous jiu-jitsu guy. Like, let's say you're Nicky Ryan, right? Nicky Ryan is getting, his job is teaching, right? He makes a living through, and also he gets paid, because he's a super famous guy, he'll get paid decent amounts to compete, right? But like, still the bulk of what he's doing is going to be teaching, right? His instructionals, seminars, classes, stuff like that, right? That's his job. But then he also trains, clearly, right? Like, so you've got to figure out a way, okay, ultimately, what's going to make me great at jiu-jitsu is going to be the training. But what's going to make me a living can be the teaching. And if you want to I think when most people say they're full-time jiu-jitsu, what they mean is they're an instructor, right? Whereas you could be a highly successful jiu-jitsu athlete and not be an instructor. So there have been guys who had regular day jobs or whatever, who did really well competitively because they were able to find a way to get their own personal training in around their job. It's probably easier to do that if you're an instructor, because if you're an instructor, you're already at the academy. So you could train while you're teaching classes. You know what I mean? So like, it's just easier to do it as an instructor, but it's still definitely possible to do it with another job. It's just like hard,
Yeah, I mean, for some of those competitors, it's like the vicious circle of, in order for you to be a good instructor, you have to train. In order for you to make money, you have to compete, because the exposure, that's what brings you the people purchasing your product. Now, in order for you to, being able to train, you need the academy, and it's like that vicious circle, never-ending circle. Just, you need one to the other, to the other, to the other, in order for it to coexist as this cohesive system, if you will, and just continuing that, creating these opportunities and opening these doors. So yeah, no, absolutely. It's definitely, I'm hoping that all of this will continue evolving, where more guys can really have these opportunities. And I think in this country, in the U.S., it's much easier to do that than in Europe, what you were saying. But I do hope that even Europe continues evolving with jiu-jitsu from that business perspective, and some of these opportunities will continue or begin for some of the others, because it's kind of sitting back and looking at some of these well-talented, like super talented guys who can share jiu-jitsu. They are even very good instructors, and they sometimes don't have these opportunities to actually make living on it. And that kind of makes me sad. It's like, I wish there was more opportunities for these guys, and I'm hoping that as time goes on, some of these things continue adjusting, and, we all can share this beautiful art with the rest of the world as it continues evolving.
I think that there are a lot more opportunities now than there have ever been before, because of two reasons. Obviously, the obvious one is the sport's growing, right? But the second one is that as it grows, you're moving into areas where so right now, most quality online jiu-jitsu instruction is going to be in the English language, right? But if you think about it, like, there's tons of people out there that can't speak English who would probably also be interested in learning this stuff. So, for instance, I have a friend, Pierre-Olivier Leclerc, he's Canadian. He's from Quebec. He can speak, French was his first language because he's Quebecois, right? He's from Quebec, right? So he has an online jiu-jitsu website, which is in French, which I think is a super smart idea. Right now, that's an entire market that, like, for instance, someone such as myself cannot tap into, right? So, and there's, I have friends in India who, like, I've suggested to, I was like, man, why don't you make a jiu-jitsu website where you teach in Hindi? You know what I mean? Yeah. Think about all the fucking people that can connect to. Or
I know few guys in Poland who have their own literally instructional websites in Polish, and I was like, that's freaking brilliant. Nobody else does this. Like, it's and there's some phenomenal Polish freaking.
Oh, here we go.
For sure.
Thomas is Polish, if you don't know, and it's all he's been talking about lately.
Polish guys are awesome. Yeah, no, absolutely.
They're definitely one of the best in Europe, for sure.
Yeah. Say it again. I want Gary to hear.
His headphones are gonna break. They're gonna snap. His head's just getting bigger and bigger.
Well, if you just look at if you look at the ADCC trials performances, Poland, the two highest medal winning countries in Europe at the trials are Poland and Finland. I'm not sure who's number one now, but that's the top two. Yeah. So just statistically, they're like one of the best. Yeah.
No, definitely. The jiu-jitsu is growing in Europe. That's no doubt. Listen, Rob, we've been at this for more than an hour. Before we kind of start wrapping this up, one of the things that we do at the end of every episode, we have a question for you from a previous guest, but they did not know it's going to be you answering it. So it's kind of a little tricky thing here, but the question is very interesting, and Gary's going to take a lead on this.
Yeah, so I mentioned him earlier, Alex Humen. We had him on yesterday, and he had two questions, one for an academy owner, which you don't yet. But he also asked, for your competition, what would you have done differently to make your experience better? So not necessarily wins or losses, but just the overall experience, your competition experience better.
Well, I think I would have done something differently in order to get better results, because I think that would have made my experience overall better.
I think he was kind of talking about nerves a lot yesterday,
or
things like that. Yeah, your mental state.
I think that okay, so I was actually thinking about this today, and this might sound dumb, but honestly, I'm going to try this out. I think it'll make hopefully a difference of some kind. I've never had, you ever see at the IBJJF tournaments, you always got those dudes with the big ass headphones, right? I've never had that before a tournament. I've never had big ass headphones that stay on my head that help me because I don't know, I never really used music to stay in the zone before competition. And I was thinking about literally just today, I was like, okay, maybe I'll buy a pair of those bigger headphones. So for the next tournament I do, I can experiment with using music to stay focused before my matches, right? I've never done that before. So I mean, I guess it's something that I got to try.
I remember a few years back, Michael Phelps, somebody was talking smack about him, and he was just sitting in the back with his headphones on, right, in his gear with a towel around his neck, and he was just sitting there listening to music, and people were in his face, and he was zoned out, and how many gold medals did he win that year?
Hey, well, listen, focus and mental state is probably more important than the physical state at that present moment. I don't know. You tell me. Do you think, which one is more important if you had to pick one?
Well, I think that ultimately what matters the most is, it's hard to say there's a single mental state you have to occupy, because there's different guys that have different, some guys are just going to be I know people that are just oh, I'm obviously going to win. I'm going to fuck all these guys up, right? Some people who just go in like that. And then there's some guys that go in that are super nervous, and, there's a whole spectrum of different mental states. And what mental state you have doesn't necessarily determine whether you win or lose, right? There's some guys that are mega nervous who do really well being mega nervous, right? So it's hard to say there's a single given mental state that is what you need to achieve. I just think that you've got to find what works for you. And the number one thing that you have to do is you have to find a way to physically execute, right? Ultimately, we're talking about a physical sport, right? I've been told by people before that I have a good poker face, that I don't look super nervous when I compete, but I definitely am. I have a lot of nerves, right? I get nervous when I compete. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't think I'm going to win. I oftentimes do think that, I have confidence in myself. I believe that I can win, right? I wouldn't be going out there if I didn't. but that, I don't know, the nerves, it like doesn't really have to do with that. Like it's always there. It's like, it's almost like a motivation to do well. Like if I wasn't nervous, I think I would feel worried. Like, oh, what's going on? Like, do I not care about this anymore? Like I think I feel nervous because I do care. I want to go out there and I want to do well because it matters to me. So like, I think the way to think about it is like, okay, you got to accept whatever mental state comes to you. Like you don't have control over that. If you're a more nervous guy, if George Costanza was a jiu-jitsu competitor, I don't think he would be, he would be different than Kramer. Kramer would go out there and he'd be like, I'm going to fuck these guys up.
Yeah, absolutely.
George would be worrying, But like, that's okay. They can both get the job done. You just got to like accept your mental state for what it
and
just sort of.
And Jerry would be even Steven.
Right. Yes, exactly.
What's your mental state right before the match? So even for a moment, just visualize, even your more recent one. You're about to step on the mat. You're about 60 seconds out. What's going through your mind? What are you thinking about? Are you thinking about anything?
So I think the first thing I just try to think about, like, what is the first thing I'm going to do? Like, what's the very first thing I'm going to do? And then I try to let it go from there, right? So I'm standing there. I'm thinking about, okay, I'm about to step on the mat. And I just focus on my mind. Okay, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to shake the guy's hand, or I'm going to shake the ref's hand. I'm going to shake the guy's hand. We're both going to step back. We're going to probably slap bump. And then I'll most likely pull guard. And then I'll what's the first grip I'm going to look to make? And sometimes that grip isn't there, right? Maybe he's doing something different than what I expected, right? Okay, that's all right. You got to just think, I'm just going to flow into the next thing. But I try to have like a basic general to the plan to the first step, right? I used to have much stricter game plans, but what I've found in time is that like at a higher level, it just becomes an unreliable thing to have, because like you just like, you're dealing with people that are just too good that you can't predict, oh, he's definitely going to do this or he's definitely going to do that. Even if you've seen him compete 100 times, right? He could change what he's doing. I think it's good to understand what they're good at, right? Like on a general level. Like if somebody has a super dangerous like knee bar, okay, maybe don't put yourself in that position to get knee barred. You know what I mean? Like maybe let's avoid that. Maybe that's his thing, right? And you want to, or maybe bait him to go for it and counter it, right? That can play into it. But ultimately, that can't be the only thing on your mind, because if that doesn't appear, you're fucked. And I've had experiences with this where I went into matches with mega strict game plans and it didn't work because the guy didn't do what I was expecting. Like I'd seen him compete many times. This is what they always did. And then they don't do it. You're like, oh fuck. This was dumb as shit. Yeah. Yeah.
When you're in that moment, you're in competition, things are moving and you're looking at the situation. Is there an active train of thought in your head, meaning he's putting his foot, I'm going to grip, I'm going to do this? Or is it more a free-flowing, natural action-reaction kind of scenario that is unfolding? What's happening in your head?
I think both things are happening. Like sometimes I'll be in the middle of a match and something will happen. Like I'll hit a move and I'll be like, oh, okay, that was pure instinct. Like I hit that really quick. But sometimes there's also like the deliberate thought process. Like I'll be in a position, I'll think, okay, that didn't work. I'll chain this into this instead, right? I'll try to get them with this. I think there's always going to be a certain interaction of the instinctive and the deliberate. And maybe that changes based upon the person, right? Maybe if you're a more analytical person, there's more like considered thought, more deliberation. Whereas a guy like, maybe Marcelo Garcia, I don't know for sure, but he seems like a very like instinctive guy. Maybe he's just fucking going with the flow, it's possible, right?
Yeah, I'm curious what's in your head, because I'm personally I analyze every situation. I'm almost talk to myself in my head. I'm curious what this feels like and looks like inside yours. So it's always interesting. Yeah, don't get in my head. There's a lot of chaos.
There's nothing. There's no fun.
Okay,
there's nothing fun in there.
Rob, we've been at this for a while. Before we formally finish this, where can people find you? You're performing in about a week and a half. Social media, websites, anywhere. Where can people connect with you if anybody wants to, see more of your stuff?
Yeah. So best bet would be Instagram at Robert Degle BJJ. That's my Instagram. There's like a link tree in my bio to my website where you can buy my instructionals, or to my YouTube channel where I have a ton of free stuff. But probably the best bet to go in the beginning is like Instagram. That's the easiest place to find everything else.
And as always, we'll post all the links in the show notes for you guys to access Rob and connect with him if you wish to do so. Until then, listen. Good luck in the way, dude. You're gonna be famous. You're gonna be on Serbian TV.
And Serbian
TV.
Damn, damn. Like you gotta sign a T-shirt for me and send me. I'm just messing. I'm just messing around. But listen, no, on a serious note, good luck.
Thanks,
big performance. We'll be watching from the sidelines. And Gary, before we wrap up,
good luck with everything. Thanks for doing this with us. It was fun having somebody have similar interests to me other than jiu-jitsu.
For the first time, Gary feels included.
Yes, I do. What's your favorite episode?
Okay, so I think my favorite moment, it's hard for me to pick a favorite episode.
Yeah, it's moments, isn't it?
My favorite moment ever is that episode where George and Jerry, they're like, we're not men, we're kids. They got to grow up.
Yeah.
And then in that episode, the moment where Jerry is like talking to Kramer, and Kramer's like, oh, I get it. You think there's got to be more to life than this and everything. And Jerry's like, yeah, exactly. He goes, well, let me fill you in on something. There isn't. And he's like, it's a prison, Jerry. It's a man-made prison. Yes. When you come back from work, she's there. Blah, blah, he's talking about.
How was your day today?
Yeah. That's like probably my single favorite.
Yeah.
Moment. I mean, there's so many.
My favorite is when Jerry's in the confessional booth talking about Watley converting to Judaism, and he offends you as a Jew. No, it offends me as a comedian. I think that's my favorite moment of the entire series.
Yeah, classic. That's
good stuff. Good stuff. All right, are we done?
Well, I feel
Thomas is done.
I left the room a long time ago. I don't know what you guys are talking about.
You need to, Netflix. Watch them all.
I just canceled my Netflix.
Awful. All right, then. Anyway. I guess we're done.
Rob, thanks for being here. Good luck. Thank you, guys. Good luck in 2 weeks, and we'll see you around.
All right. Thanks, man. Peace.
Thanks, guys.
Later.
Thank you for listening to RŌL Radio. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review and help us make the show even more amazing. For future episodes, check out our website and follow us on all major podcast platforms. Take care.